Hello, Jeff here from Hanging by the Moments. I want to take a few minutes. I've been really busy this last couple of weeks. I got a craft show that I'm doing this weekend and been really ramping up in my spare time doing that. And so I'm sorry I haven't put out any videos in the last little bit, but that's the way it goes with this kind of stuff. You just do what you can do when you can do it. Um, One of the things I want to talk about real quick, and this is just because it's on my mind. I know that there was a lot of questions about grounding, and I promise we will get to grounding. But as I work in my shop, the last couple of weeks, I've been gearing up for this craft show, and one of the things that I started incorporating into my shop, I guess close to about a year ago, is a laser engraver. And so that's what I kind of want to talk about is laser engravers. A couple people have asked me questions about those as far as like upgrades and what are my opinions on those things. And so that's just what I want to kind of share with you, what I've learned over the last year with them, and so that you can make a judgment for yourself on is this something I want to go with. And while technically it is a CNC machine, there are differences between that and a router. My garage light just turned off, so if it's darker, I apologize for that. If I'm sweating a lot, it's because it's very hot. I got the garage door down so that I don't get the noise from the streets or the cars going down the street, because it's right around rush hour. And I live on a fairly busy street a couple times a day. Most of the day is quiet, but around 5 o'clock there's a lot of traffic. So talking about laser engravers, there's a lot of companies that are putting out kits to go onto your CNC machine. There are advantages to that, in my opinion. Now, this is just Jeff's opinion on this, and I'm going to tell you my perspective from where I came from. So, the entire reason that I bought a CNC router was to play with it, and then as I got into it, I realized that I like working with wood, and I was actually pretty good at it. But the laser engraver, my entire intent for the laser engraver was to put my name, email address, website, company logo, all that information on the back, especially on things that aren't even. I was doing a lot of that with like an engraving bit on the back, and unless you engrave it first on the back with your company logo and stuff, it can be really hard, especially if you're doing like a relief carving or anything that's like a stacked text or anything like that. Clamping it down, holding it in place, all that stuff can get to be real hairy. And so my thought was, hey, let's do a laser engraver. I don't have to hold anything down. And so I opted for what is referred to as a diode laser. So if anybody's been looking at the JTech laser that goes, they're looking at putting one on the long mill, I think. I don't know if it's actually out yet. They make an attachment for the Winfinity, and there's a handful of other ones, and there's some little ones you can buy on Amazon that have diode lasers on them. Now I'm going to get kind of into the technical side of what a diode laser is and kind of give you my insights on what you might be looking at doing. Okay, so laser, people think of a laser, wow, I'll be able to cut stuff out, I'll be able to burn things, everything's going to be really quick. With a diode laser, that is not necessarily true. If you're only going to be working with woods and all you're going to be doing is engraving with that, then yes, that is true. You'll be able to fly through that. Doing your logo on the back of a piece is going to go extremely fast. If you're wanting to cut anything with a diode laser, 3 millimeters maximum depth that I've been able to get out of a diode laser. And I'm using what's considered a 20-watt laser, but they lie to you on that. I'm just going to go ahead and be honest about that. If you buy a 20-watt diode laser, it's really more about like 7.2 watts, probably realistically more somewhere around the 5.5, 5.7 range. That's output. The way they rate those is the 20 watts is the power coming from the power supply. That's its power consumption, not its power output. JTech is a little bit more honest with that. JTech will put out what they call a 7-watt laser. That's going to be somewhere around 25 to 30 watts input power. It's a good laser, but it's still not intended to cut metals. It's not intended to etch metals. And a lot of people say that it has to do with the power, and that is true to some extent, but the other thing is the wavelength of that laser. And when I'm talking about the wavelength, it's talking about how fast the pulsing in that laser is. And so you have to have certain frequencies to be able to do certain things, because it's not just that power, the frequency has to do with it too. And so you'll see people like on, let's just take marking, say stainless steel, for instance. Can you do that with a diode laser? Yes. How long is it going to take you? A very long time. It's going to take you a very, very, very long time, because you have to go extremely slow. Because one, the power output is not right, and the other thing is the frequency is not exactly right. I've done some of that, and you can get decent results. You see a lot of these videos out there where people use dry moly lube, or they use this stuff called sear mark. And if you actually read the documentation on that, the sear mark is designed for a 40 watt output CO2 laser. And it works good for that, and it works fast. But that's a 40 watt output CO2 laser. So I guess what I'm getting at is you kind of need to know what you're getting into. If you're buying a diode laser like a JTech, or the one I've got is an Otor. The Otor is, I hate to say it's an Amazon special because I bought mine from Gear Best. But you can get it on Amazon, you can get it from Gear Best, you can get it from different places. But they are a tool that can be used in your shop. You just have to know the limitations of that tool. There are a lot of neat little things you can do with it. See if I can show you one of them. So this right here is a ceramic tile I bought from big box hardware store, I won't give a name of it, and turned it into a coaster. And it's a picture of me and my wife when we went to the Bahamas a couple years ago. So you can do neat little things like that. This one tile, almost 2 hours. So it's not something you're going to be just pumping out one after another after another. If you do that with a CO2 laser, you're probably somewhere in the 30-minute range, right? 15, 20 minutes, probably something like that. So you can do these things. You have to just be smart about how you design things and how you actually produce them. The other thing that I'm going to caution people about is you have to consider, and this is on a personal side, this is not a technical issue per se, but if you attach a laser to your router, you can't run your router and your laser at the same time. At least I haven't seen one, and I don't know why you'd want to. So that's one of the reasons that I have a standalone laser. I can be doing logos on the laser, popping those out, while this thing's over here cutting off everything else I need to do. And if all you're going to do is just put your logo on the back of stuff, in my mind, there's no need in spending the extra amount of money for adding it to this machine, unless you want that bigger working area. But then remember, you're going to work best with soft materials, wood, and Now I'm going to get into the one thing that you really, 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 really need to be careful with, and this is one of the things. I'm not going to steer people away from trying to put one on their machine, but I will tell you what some of the manufacturers say. I had kind of a discussion with somebody a couple weeks ago about putting a laser on a Bob CNC. Bob CNC does not support it, nor do they recommend putting a laser on their machine. And their reasoning for it, if you go to their website, is for eye safety. Okay? And that is one thing you have to be extremely careful with, because we're talking about an ultraviolet laser, and it's not just the light looking directly into it that can damage your eyes. It's the reflective light too, especially if you're working with metals. You get a lot of reflective light. My laser, I built an enclosure for it, and it has two laser filter panels in the top of it, and the rest of it is entirely black, and that's to absorb that light. But when that laser is running, even with those laser filters on there, I do not operate my laser without wearing safety goggles on top of my regular glasses. So that, to me, that's a real concern when you're talking from a technical aspect. Yes, the JTech makes this nice little 3D printed cover that's supposed to cover all that light, but when you're running it over material, I'm telling you, it lights up my garage like a Christmas tree. If I run the thing without having the cover on, it looks like the police officers are in my garage because there's that much blue light flashing. These things really do give off a lot of light. And you have to be careful with it. Not saying that it's not something you can use, but you have to take that into consideration. Is this something you're going to have where your kids can get to it? Can somebody walk through the door? Do you go through the safety procedures of making sure that you have something on the door letting people know that the laser is running? These are all things you have to be concerned about, especially if you have kids around or anything like that. As far as like hooking it to your machine, most of the companies that are supporting this kind of make it simple plug and play type thing, and it's not really a hard thing to do. You just need to be cautious about it, and you really need to know the limitations of what you're looking at. So, talking about the differences between diodes and CO2, one of the reasons that I opted for a diode laser rather than a CO2, because yeah, you can buy these, they're called K40s. They're a Chinese CO2 laser. You can get them for about $400, $400 or $500. With a CO2 laser, you have to provide cooling for it. So that means distilled water and a circulation pump. The other thing you have to be concerned about with a laser, and it's one of the concerns I have about personally, I have with putting one on a CNC machine, the fumes. Even burning wood with that, if you're out in the open like this, you don't have anything that's going to just put that flame out if it catches fire. You have to have air blowing across what you're burning when that burns, even if it's just wood. Yeah, you can get away with it for a long time, but if it catches fire and you're enclosed in a shop and you've got dust on your table, guess what? You've just created a matchbox. So, you know, that's why when you get into the CO2 lasers, you see that you have to have venting. You have to have good ventilation. If you go to burn plastics, which I don't really recommend, but if you go to burn plastics, you really have to have good ventilation. When I do these are actually painted tiles, and then you burn the paint. You have to ventilate. You have to. Otherwise, if you try to run these, I've seen guys run these in their house, and if you're trying to do anything like that, it's going to smoke up things. It's just going to. You're burning stuff. You can open a window and try to let it go out, but I'm going to tell you that it really needs to be vented outside somewhere. So that's just kind of I think that kind of covered all the little high points I wanted to talk about. You know, that lasers have their place, and you just got to be careful with them. I don't say that they can't be useful, because I use mine all the time. It's been running every day for the last 2.5, 3 weeks. So running every day for hours a day. But it's also a nice thing to let this machine run and let the laser run at the same time. Let them both go. And then you can double up on your work. While this thing's cutting out, you're putting your logo on over there. You don't have to do everything all on one machine. Plus, it also kind of opens up you as a, now I'm talking more on a personal level, me as a custom shop, with the way that I do a lot of my work. It's one of a kind stuff. Somebody will come to me with a picture that they want done. And so one of the things that I do is I burn stuff on canvas. And the diode laser does that very well. I can burn that on canvas and people have a nice, beautiful look. It looks like a black and white photo, but it's on canvas. And so I can let that run while I'm doing other things over here, whether it's for a wedding or baby shower or something like that. I can have both machines going at the same time. Where if I attach to this machine, I can't. I have to choose one or the other. So I mean, it's like anything else. You can't use your diamond drag bit and cut out things on the CNC at the same time. It just can't be done. But so I guess what I'm saying at the bottom of all this is just be cautious. If you go down this road that you want to add one of these, make sure that you understand what you're getting involved with. They're not, I won't say they're not simple, because to operate them is really not that big of a deal. I do have some questions on how, like, the long mill and the Onefinity actually communicate with that if you have to generate stuff in like VCarve. And this gets more into a software discussion, but if you're looking at getting just a regular laser engraver, or you got to be careful, because like some of the K40s won't use this software that I'm fixing to mention, but there's a piece of software called Lightburn, sorry. So and Lightburn, I'm just going to tell you my personal opinion, it's the best $40 I've ever spent in my life. Next to the money I spent, never mind. In my business, it's the best $40 I've ever spent, because that gives me 2 licenses. I can generate my code on either my laptop or on my desktop that's out here in the shop, and I can bring either one of them. I can use my desktop that's out in the shop, plug into the laser, let it run, or I can bring my laptop out here and plug into it, let it run. So it does a lot of stuff that people would use things like GIMP or Inkscape to generate. Lightburn handles all that inside. You can put a picture in, you can choose your dithering profile, you can choose which direction you want the laser to run, you can choose whether you want to go at an angle or 90-degree angle, 45, 33 and a half, you know. Change your DPI. You can change all those things in there. Plus, it's got some really neat offsetting tools. But I want you to understand the limitations of these machines. They are not, a diode laser is not intended to etch metal. It's really not intended to be used on metal at all. So you're going to be woods, soft materials like plastics, foam. I've seen people cut foam. Construction paper works really good for doing templates. It actually does a pretty good job with laser and glass. There's certain techniques for doing that. I've done some pretty neat stuff with glass. I actually prefer doing glass with that than I do a drag bit, because I I can get a lot more detail and the speed is much faster. So it's a different technique, but you'll see a lot of YouTube videos out there that show this process being really simple, and there's a lot more to it than what it looks like. But just be careful with it. Be careful. Make sure to take care of the eye protection, and don't depend on those shields, okay? Because you can't have that shield down to where it's touching your material all the way and still clear everything. If you have any unevenness in the material, you're either gonna mess up your material or something. And then you really have to have, if you're running a diode laser, you have to have some type of air assist in order to protect the optics of that laser. There's a lot. JTech does a pretty good job with it, but there's other ones out there that don't do a good job with it at all. But JTech actually, I think they blow a fan down through the heat sink, and that fan is supposed to blow out the smoke and stuff so that it doesn't get back onto the optics. Realistically, you're going to be better off actually either 3D printing yourself an air assist, something that's going to isolate and blow air directly in that beam of light. There's plenty of stuff on Thingiverse and stuff like that you can 3D print, and that changes how these things work dramatically. Just be careful with this stuff, guys. It's just, we all know that all this stuff is dangerous. You know, we're messing with rotating machines, things that go from one end to the other and can go at extremely high rates of speed. And, you know, we got pinch points, we got screws, we got belts, we got pulleys. The laser is just another thing to consider. And so just keep all that stuff in mind. I hope this helps some people out. I hope it's not too confusing for people, because that's not the intent. The intent is not to try to convince you not to get a laser. It's just I want you to have your eyes open when you go into the process and know what you're getting into. Because don't go and buy a 20-watt laser thinking, oh, I'm going to be able to cut aluminum or stainless steel with it, because it's not going to do it. You'll burn the laser up trying. That's another thing you have to think about too with the diode laser, because you're pulsing it all the time. And even with the CO2 laser, you have some things that are going to wear out, and it's number one's going to be the diode. And the more you use it and the higher intensity you have to put out of that laser, the shorter the lifespan gets. So if you're running your laser at 100% power every time you turn it on, 6 months you'll be buying another laser. If we're talking about diode laser. CO2 laser, I'm not real sure. It depends on the tubes. Depends on the manufacturer of the tubes. Depends on how well you cool it. Let your coolant run out, it won't last long at all. But, you know, just keep these things in mind that, you know, they have their own challenges. And it's just like the whole conversation about bits. You can think of a laser as just another bit. It has its own sets of challenges and limitations. You can't use a 1/4 inch end mill to do a tight radius. Doesn't happen. I don't care how you try it or what you try to do, you can't use a 1/4 inch end mill to do a 1/8 radius. It's not going to look right, or especially a 1/32. You just can't. And the laser's not going to do what it's not capable of doing either. So y'all just keep these things in mind. I hope I haven't sounded like I ran on and on and on and on. If I did, then I apologize for that. But, you know, I just want to take a few minutes out of my night while I'm trying to let things burn and run in the background. Y'all just let me know what you think. I hope this helps somebody. And we'll talk to you next time.